Hi, this is Joyce Pellino-Crane. I'm the news director at Westford Cat, and I'm here today with Selectman Chairman Kelly Ross of the Board of Selectmen.
That's correct.
And we're here to talk about the meeting that took place on October 25th regarding the asphalt plant settlement. I asked Kelly to come into the studio today. Today is October 27th, 2 days later. I asked him to come in to talk about that meeting, which lasted, it started at 7 p.m. and went until 1:45 a.m. in the morning. So I was just fascinated by the content of the meeting and the way it went. And I thought it would be interesting to ask Kelly a few questions about the meeting and how he presided over it.
Okay.
So first, Kelly, I just wanted to ask, why did you allow the meeting to go past midnight into the wee hours of the morning?
Yeah, certainly a meeting of that length is not ideal. We typically would have meetings much shorter than that. But I said up front we wanted to hear what people had to say and we wanted to answer their questions. And I said I would stay there as long as it took to hear what everyone had to say. This is clearly an issue that is extremely important to a great number of people. And, you know, if they're all going to come to a meeting and want to be heard, then I want to hear them.
So I thought it took great strength to sit on the stage in the middle of a long table and have an auditorium of almost 800 people expressing anger at you. This is your hometown. This is where you've lived for many years. And it can't feel good to be the object of the anger.
Well, I mean, I certainly was there to have, I was there, I was a person who the anger is directed at, but I really believe their anger is at the asphalt plant. I think they're feeling a lot of emotions. I think people are disappointed, frustrated, angry, scared. You know, this is huge, it's unknown, it's in their neighborhoods. They're concerned about how it affects their property values, their health, their quality of life. I get that. And so I completely understand that they want to express all that and that I am the person who makes the most sense to express it at. And you know, again, we were there because the selectmen entered into a settlement agreement. It was pretty clear they are not supportive of that decision. And, you know, as the chair of the Board of Selectmen, I was the face of that settlement that they don't like. So I completely get why that was directed towards me.
Yes, and so you sort of drew the short straw this year because it seems as though anyone who was the chairman would be the face of the asphalt plant.
Yeah, that would be the case. You know, I don't view it as drawing the short straw, though. That's how our government works. Someone needs to do that. I know other chairs have had their challenges in their years, and this one was a little different, but I think any one of the five of us would have done what I did, you know, served in that role, and I think they all would have done a great job at it.
And so my interpretation, I sat through the meeting until almost 1 o'clock, and then
So close.
I hadn't even had dinner yet, so
No.
wanted to go home and sleep. That's what I do at 1 a.m. So I did leave, but at 1 a.m. you went on for another 45 minutes.
Right.
What happened in those 45 minutes that I didn't see?
Oh gosh, I don't know if I could identify what happened when, but I think it was just more questions, more expression of, you know, I think the theme of the night from a great many people in the audience is they would like, that they didn't like the settlement agreement and they wanted the selectmen to reconsider that decision, at least to talk about it again. And we will be doing that at our meeting next week. We will talk about it again and see if anything we learned on, since we made that decision, has changed our thinking on that decision.
So you heard the voice of the people then?
I heard the voice of a lot of people who were there. There are a number of people who talked to me outside of that meeting who are more supportive of the settlement agreement. So while there are a great number of people who do not support the settlement agreement, it is not unanimous in town as might have been portrayed that night.
Well, that's interesting. Why didn't those people who are supportive speak up or come to the meeting?
Well, I can speculate that, there was, look, and I want to reiterate, I know people were angry and scared and emotions were running high. But as someone who was sitting in front of that crowd, there was a certain amount of discomfort. I at times was, heckled or booed or heard loud groans. Was told that that someone would work to make sure I'm never elected again, and a fair number of cheers followed that. And again, I get the feelings that were going there, but in the face of all that, I think if someone made the decision that, I think I don't want to get up to a microphone and say something that the people in this audience don't want to hear, I think I can understand why they might make that choice.
So let's talk a little bit about the security that was at the meeting that night. I looked around and I saw police officers at every door near all the microphones. Was there a security concern?
Our police department is outstanding, and we are very fortunate to have the leadership of Chief McEnany running that department. He does an outstanding job, as does the department. And when it comes to matters of security, there is no way I'm going to substitute my judgment for his judgment. And in his judgment, with a crowd of that size, with very emotional issue, with a lot of people, scared, angry, frustrated, as we've talked about, in his judgment, having a police presence there made a whole lot of sense. And, I think he made a good call on that one.
And the open meeting law occupied a lot of the meeting. It seemed to, people seemed to need to speak and air their concerns and grievances over what they believe was a violation. And they seemed to need to talk about that for a very long time.
Right.
And then there was the concern over in the agenda announcements when you referenced executive session regarding Newport Materials, the word strategy was used versus
Settlement
Settlement,
mediation might be a word that we could have used there, or something like that.
Was it done with thought or malice or to be less transparent?
No, absolutely not. It's boilerplate language that we use for a wide variety of topics, and it's actually language that's suggested in official documents and all that, and we just followed it. That was something I could have done better on, as I said in the meeting. Instead of just kind of mindlessly going along with the same language that we've always gone with for these types of, like union negotiations or anything else, it makes sense now in retrospect to be more specific than we had been in the past. But it wasn't a case of trying to be deceptive or anything like that. It was more a case of just following the past practice without giving any thought to whether we should be doing something differently.
Would you do anything differently in terms of the providing information to the community? If you had to do it over again, would you bring the information earlier to the town?
I think we couldn't do that because yeah, I mean, you know, you saw how a lot of people are unhappy with settling. And if we wanted to make the case to the town that we should settle this, we would have to point out all the flaws in our case and all the reasons why we thought it was much more probable than not that we are going to lose this if we fight to the end. Anything we would bring to the town would have to be in a public meeting. The opposition's lawyer could be sitting there right in the audience taking notes about us saying all the things we would have to say about why our case is so weak and why we think we're going to lose. And that's probably not going to work out well when you're trying to negotiate a settlement. You know, you're probably not going to extract as much out of them as you might otherwise get if they don't know what you're thinking. So I think including people prior to nailing down the settlement was just something we couldn't do without weakening our position.
I understand. Is there anything you would like to share with the community now that maybe after the meeting you thought of that you might have liked to have said?
You know, I think we tried to articulate our reasoning as best we could, but I saw a couple of fundamental differences with what we on the Board of Selectmen believed and what it seemed the audience believed, and I'll just try and summarize it in two areas, even though it's much more complicated than that. But one is, I think to us on the Board of Selectmen, the negotiated settlement is far superior than the asphalt plant we would get if we lost in court, which we thought was highly likely would happen. I think people in the audience didn't see that much difference between what we negotiated and what would happen anyway. You know, there were provisions for monitoring, for instance. People in the audience seemed to believe that the monitoring wouldn't be effective. You know, it just wouldn't work. If it did work, the penalties we imposed wouldn't be enforced. If we tried to enforce them, then Newport Materials wouldn't adhere to the enforcement, wouldn't do what we directed them to do, and would perhaps take us to court, and then in court they would bully us and we would give in and nothing would happen. I couldn't disagree with that more. I think our town staff in every department performs in outstanding fashion. I think they have served us well. You know, as I near the end of my selectman career, I'm not going to be running again in the spring. I announced that back in 2014 on election night. You know, as I near the end and I think about the pros and cons and positives and negatives, you know, town staff, getting to know our town staff was a real positive. They are outstanding at what they do, and I have no doubt when it comes to implementing and enforcing the rules we negotiated as part of the settlement, they will do an outstanding job with that, as they do with everything.
But what about the Chelmsford side? So if you look at, I mean, as you showed that night in the meeting, there is the boundary, the property that is owned by Richard D. Felice or Newport Materials spills over into Chelmsford. And I'm curious, is there an outlet for trucks in that area? Is there a way of monitoring the Chelmsford piece of the property?
Yeah, and those details need to be worked out. You know, we came to the settlement agreement not that long ago, and so there are details like that that have to be worked out, and I'm certainly not an expert on that. I would have to go to town staff to get that information, and as you might imagine, they are flooded with questions right now, so turnaround on answers might not be as quick as we would like right now, but we will address all of those concerns.
So I just want to wind the tape back a little bit,
Okay.
tape back a little bit,
Okay.
and go back to when you were speaking about Tuesday's meeting,
right?
the Selectmen's meeting, which would be October,
25th? Oh,
No,
which
I'm sorry,
which meeting?
no, it would be November 1st.
Oh, our next meeting. Okay.
Your next meeting,
Yep.
November 1st.
Right.
What's going to happen?
Yeah, so, you know, the people in the audience asked us to revisit our decision and talk about it one more time now that we've had their input, the input from the audience there that night. And so we're going to do that. We are going to meet jointly with the planning board. We will have a discussion in executive session because, again, it's about litigation, it's about a settlement, and if we're going to potentially change what we're going to do, we have to talk about that without the other side observing what we're talking about. So, and then we will, I have no idea where it will go. And, you know, as you know, I can't ask other members in advance. That would violate the open meeting law. So I will find out in that meeting if anyone has a change in thinking, and then we will proceed from there. I imagine we are probably not going to make an announcement that night. With something this sensitive, I think it's important that we really work on the wording of what we say. And because it's very much intertwined with a legal situation, I think we might want town council to review what we have to say to make sure we are following the rules. But I would imagine, like maybe the day after the meeting or something, we would put out a written statement that everyone can look at and see what our thinking was and see what our decision was and get a full explanation of where we think we go from here.
And just to wrap up, I heard you say you're not going to be running again as for selectmen.
That's correct.
Your term ends in May.
Right.
And you're going to what? Go back to being just a regular old citizen?
You know, I don't know. I really love this town. I love being involved with the town. But after 6 years on the finance committee and then 9 years as selectman, that's a pretty big commitment. And so I'll have to I'll have to think about what I want to do next. But I'm sure I will want to stay involved with this town in some capacity. I just love it too much.
When did you move here?
1999.
So it's been quite a while.
Yeah, it's been 17 years, and I just really came to love this town.
Well, I'm sure that you'll want things to go back to the way they used to be when we were all calm and...
yeah, you know, and it will, but again, this is a big, hairy deal. I get that. And when something like this is going on, emotions will run high. People in Westford are really good people. And, you know, I don't think anyone wants to be angry or wants to be scared or frustrated. And so things will get back to normal at some point, one way or another.
And you'll go back to maybe doing more hiking?
Oh, I love it. You know, something I got into last year was winter hiking, and I used to hate winter. I used to just really hate winter, and now I'm looking forward to getting back up in the White Mountains once we hit January and February.
Wow, the White Mountains, that's pretty brave in the winter.
You know, I think if you're well prepared for it, it's just a walk in the woods on a cold, snowy day.
Well, learn how to build an igloo.
There you go.
Well, thank you, Kelly. I really appreciate your coming into the office on a moment's notice, into the studio rather, on a moment's notice. I know that you've had a tough week, and I think it took a lot of fortitude to face that audience on Tuesday, and I think you were very gracious to come in today and meet with me. So.
Happy to do it, and you know, anytime.
Thank you. So for Westford Cat, this is Joyce Pellino-Crane saying see you around town.